This isn't a story I tell often, because reliving it feels like tracing the fault lines of an earthquake that leveled my world. But it happened. Every word of it is true, and it taught me that sometimes the only way to rebuild is to use the rubble of a beautiful lie. The light from the jeweler's loupe was a cold, unforgiving star, and under its glare, the 3-carat diamond on my finger, the rock my fiancé Julian had proposed with just 2 weeks ago at Alinea, slipping it on my finger between a course of edible helium balloons and whispering promises of forever, was exposed for what it was. The appraiser, a stern woman named Mrs. Gable, with silver hair pulled into a severe bun, looked up at me, her expression a flat, sterile mask of pity. "I'm sorry, dear," she said, her voice devoid of any actual sorrow. "But this is a near-perfect cubic zirconia, a very, very good fake, but worthless." If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. The silence that followed her words was so absolute, I could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights and the frantic hummingbird beat of my own heart. Worthless. The word echoed in the cavern of my skull. It didn't make sense. Julian, my Julian, was a rising star in finance, a man who wore Tom Ford suits and had a reserved table at Gibson's. He'd wept when he proposed, his voice thick with emotion as he told me I was the only real thing in his life. He'd presented the ring in a velvet box from Graff, the legendary diamond house. The stone was magnificent, an emerald-cut diamond so clear you could see the future in it. My future. Our future. But the woman across the desk had just declared that future a forgery. "There must be a mistake," I whispered, my throat tight. "The receipt, the certificate, it's all from Graff. It was appraised at over $80,000. Mrs. Gable slid the ring back across the polished mahogany desk. It glinted under the lights, a perfect, beautiful lie. "The setting might be platinum, but the stone is glass, or crystal. Whatever it is, it's not a diamond. Whoever sold this to your fiancé is a con artist." I stumbled out of the LaSalle Street jeweler's office and into the harsh Chicago sunlight, the fake ring feeling like a shackle on my finger. A con artist. The phrase ricocheted through my mind, but it wasn't aimed at some anonymous seller. It was aimed at Julian. Suddenly, 100 tiny, dissonant moments from the past few months clicked into place, forming a sickening mosaic of deception. It started subtly. There was the matter of the GIA certificate, the diamond's official birth certificate. When I'd asked for it to get the ring insured, Julian had waved a dismissive hand. "It's in my safe deposit box at the bank, sweetheart. Super secure. I'll grab it next week." Next week never came. Then there was the pressure about my savings. I was a pastry chef, and for 5 years I'd been meticulously saving every spare dollar, working brutal 16-hour days to build a nest egg. My dream was to open my own patisserie, a little jewel box of a shop in Lincoln Park. I had just over $90,000 saved, my entire life's work and ambition distilled into a bank account. Julian knew all about it. He called it my croissant cash. A week after he proposed, he'd sat me down in our stunning Gold Coast apartment, an apartment I now realized was probably financed on little more than air and charm. He'd pitched me an investment. "It's a pre-IPO tech fund, Chloe," he'd said, his voice a low, urgent thrum of excitement. "It's a guaranteed triple-your-money situation in 6 months. A friend of a friend at Goldman is letting me in. I'm putting my own commission bonus into it. You should too. Think about it. That $90,000 could become nearly $300,000. You could open your patisserie debt-free with enough left over for a new kitchen that would make Gordon Ramsay weep." He was so convincing, so full of confident energy, that my caution felt like disloyalty. I almost said yes on the spot, but a small, nagging voice, the one that tells you to double-check the oven temperature, held me back. I told him I'd think about it. His smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Don't think too long, baby. Opportunities like this don't wait. The memory made me physically ill. I leaned against the cold brick of a building, the city's roar fading into a dull drone. He wasn't trying to help me. He was trying to take my money, my croissant cash. The ring wasn't a promise, it was bait. A dazzling $80,000 lure to reel in my life savings. And the worst part? He hadn't even paid for the lure. He had dangled a cheap piece of glass in front of me and sold the real diamond, pocketing the cash while planning to fleece me for the rest. I felt a wave of nausea so profound I had to brace myself against the wall. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot, creeping poison that spread through my veins. People on the sidewalk swirled around me, their faces a blur. I was just another woman in a city of millions, but I felt utterly, terrifyingly alone, marked by a betrayal so colossal it seemed to have its own gravitational pull, warping the very air I was breathing. I took a cab back to the apartment, my mind a maelstrom of shock and burgeoning rage. The beautiful home we shared, with its panoramic views of Lake Michigan, now felt like a stage set. Every object, the leather sofa, the abstract art on the walls, the expensive bottle of scotch on the bar cart, seemed like a prop in the grand play of Julian's success. Was any of it real? When I walked in, he was on the phone, pacing the living room floor. He was laughing, that deep, confident laugh that had first captivated me. He ended the call when he saw me. "There's my beautiful fiancé," he said, striding over to kiss me. I flinched. He paused, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "Everything okay, baby?" I couldn't hold it in. The words tumbled out, acidic and accusatory. "I went to get the ring appraised today, Julian." His body went rigid. The charming, easygoing mask fell away, and for a split second I saw something cold and reptilian in his eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a look of wounded confusion. "Appraised? Why? I told you it was all handled." "The jeweler said it's fake." I held out my hand, the ring suddenly feeling obscene. "She said it's cubic zirconia." Julian stared at the ring, then at my face, and he did something I never would have expected. He laughed. It wasn't his usual warm laugh. It was sharp and incredulous. "A fake? Chloe, that's insane. Did you go to some back alley pawn shop? The woman is probably trying to scam you. Switch out the stone." "It was Hollander's on LaSalle. They're one of the most respected jewelers in the city." He shook his head, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair in a gesture of pure exasperation. "Honey, listen to yourself. You're being paranoid. I bought that ring from Graf myself. I have the certificate locked away. Why are you doing this? Why are you trying to create drama where there is none?" He was so good. His indignation was so flawless, his concern so believable, that a sliver of doubt pierced my certainty. Could Mrs. Gable have been wrong? Was I losing my mind? He saw the uncertainty in my eyes and moved in, his expression softening into one of deep hurt. He took my hands in his. "Chloe, look at me. I love you. I spent a fortune on that ring because you are worth 100 fortunes to me. To hear you accuse me of what, exactly? Of giving you a fake ring? It's insulting. It's devastating." He was framing himself as the victim and doing it with an actor's skill. He claimed the original jeweler must have scammed him, a sophisticated investor. He promised to march down to Graf with me the next day and raise holy hell. He'd get the certificate from his safe deposit box. He said all the right things, his voice a perfect blend of outrage and wounded love. He pulled me into a hug, stroking my hair, whispering how much he adored me, how we couldn't let this ridiculous, baseless accusation come between us. Lying in bed that night, pressed against his sleeping form, I felt a chilling clarity descend. He was too smooth. His defense was too polished, too immediate. An innocent man would have been confused, then furious at the jeweler. Julian had been furious at me. He hadn't examined the ring. He had examined my face, searching for weakness. His goal wasn't to prove the ring was real. His goal was to make me believe I was crazy for ever doubting it. The heartbreak was a physical ache in my chest, a crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. The man I loved, the man I had agreed to marry, didn't exist. He was a performance, a carefully constructed illusion, and I was his mark. The tears that slid silently down my temples weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of rage. The grief was cauterizing, hardening into something else. Resolve. I wasn't going to just expose him. I was going to play his game. I was going to use the same tools he used, deceit, manipulation, and a flawless performance, to dismantle his life from the inside out. He thought I was a naive little baker, blinded by love and sparkling things. He had no idea I was about to become the architect of his ruin. The first step was to find out who Julian really was. The next morning I made an excuse about needing to visit my sick aunt in Naperville, and instead took the L train to a much grittier part of Chicago. I met with a private investigator named Frank Kowalski in a dingy diner in the West Loop that smelled of stale coffee and grease. Frank was a former CPD detective with tired eyes and a crumpled suit, but he came highly recommended. I told him everything, my voice low and steady. I slid a retainer check across the sticky table. "I want to know everything," I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. His real financial situation, his past relationships, any other investment opportunities he's been involved in. I want to know where he sold the real diamond. I want every skeleton in his closet, Frank, and I want them cataloged. Frank just nodded, pocketing the check. "You got it, kid." While Frank dug into Julian's life, I went back to our apartment and played my part. I became the most apologetic, loving, trusting fiancé imaginable. That evening I made his favorite meal, coq au vin, and greeted him with a kiss. "I'm so sorry about yesterday, Julian," I said, my voice trembling with expertly feigned remorse. "You were right. I was being paranoid and ridiculous. I was just so overwhelmed by the value of it. I got scared. I trust you completely." The relief that washed over his face was so profound, it was almost comical. He thought he had me back under his spell. He hugged me tightly. "It's okay, baby. I forgive you. We all get a little crazy sometimes." The condescension in his voice was a razor blade, but I just smiled and snuggled closer. The next 2 weeks were an exercise in supreme self-control. I listened to his fabricated stories about his big wins at the firm. I complimented his genius. I acted like the perfect, adoring fool. Meanwhile, Frank's reports started coming in, each one a fresh layer of filth on the man I thought I knew. Julian wasn't a rising star. He was a disgraced former stockbroker who'd lost his license for churning accounts. He wasn't an investor. He was a predator who ran small-scale Ponzi schemes, charming people out of their retirement funds and investment portfolios. The Gold Coast. Apartment was leased, and he was 4 months behind on rent. The Tom Ford suits were bought on credit cards that were screaming past their limits. He had a mountain of debt so high it blotted out the sun. And then Frank delivered the kill shot. A pawn ticket from a high-end broker on Jewelers Row. Dated the day after Julian supposedly bought my ring from Graff. He had sold the 3-carat emerald-cut diamond for $55,000 in cash. He'd likely used a small fraction of that to have the setting fitted with the cubic zirconia. The rest had vanished, probably to pay off an angry previous investor or to keep his precarious house of cards from collapsing for another month. The PI report was a litany of lies, a biography of a ghost. He preyed on successful women, using his charm as a key to unlock their financial lives. I wasn't the first, but I was determined to be the last. Armed with this knowledge, my resolve hardened from steel to diamond. It was time to set my own trap. That weekend, I brought up the investment again. We were having brunch at a trendy spot in River North. I swirled the mimosa in my glass, looking at him with wide, trusting eyes. "Julian, I've been thinking a lot about that tech fund you mentioned. I was so silly to hesitate. I want in. I want to build our future together." His eyes lit up with a predatory gleam he couldn't quite conceal. "Really, Chloe? That's fantastic. You won't regret this." "I know," I said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "But there's just one thing. My dad always taught me to be smart with assets. Before I liquidate my savings, I want to get all our major assets properly insured, especially the ring." I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes, but I pressed on before he could formulate an objection. "I mean, it's worth over $80,000. It's reckless not to have it fully covered. What if our apartment gets robbed? What if I lose it? It would be like losing our entire future down a sewer grate." He was trapped. He couldn't argue against insuring a valuable asset without revealing he knew it was worthless. To do so would be to admit his lie. He was forced to agree. "Of course, sweetheart, you're right. That's a very smart idea." "Great," I said, my smile blindingly bright. "I've already looked into it. There's a company that specializes in high-value jewelry, a private insurer. They're much more discreet than the big companies. They do a private appraisal and everything. We'll need the original GIA certificate, of course." The color drained from his face. "The certificate, the one document that would expose the stone as a fake." "Right, the certificate. It's still at the bank. It's been a crazy week at work. I haven't had a chance to get over there." "Don't worry," I said sweetly. "I called the bank. They said as long as I have a notarized letter from you, I can access the box. I can pick it up tomorrow while I'm running errands." Checkmate. He was cornered. He spent the next few hours frantically trying to come up with an excuse. He said the box required 2 keys, that his was at the office. He said the bank had new regulations. Each lie was more desperate than the last. I just smiled and countered each one with calm, simple logic. Finally defeated, he slumped. "You know what, Chloe? I have a confession. It's so stupid. I lost the certificate. It must have gotten misplaced in the move. I've been too embarrassed to tell you." It was a weak lie, but it was the only one he had left. I pretended to be understanding. "Oh, honey, why didn't you just say so? That's no problem. We can just contact GIA for a duplicate. They'll have the inscription number on file from the original purchase. Or even better, Graf will have it. They keep meticulous records." Every solution I offered was another brick in the wall, closing in around him. He was sweating now, a faint sheen on his forehead. He had no way of producing a document that would verify the authenticity of a diamond he had sold weeks ago. He thought he was a master manipulator, but he was just a common grifter, and his playbook was distressingly thin. He was an amateur playing chess with a grandmaster, and he didn't even realize the game had started. I let him squirm for a full day before I offered him the way out that I had been planning all along. "Julian," I said, my voice full of fake sympathy, "you look so stressed. Don't worry about the certificate. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise." He looked at me confused. "What do you mean?" "Well," I began, lowering my voice conspiratorially, "the insurance company, they only need the original purchase receipt to create the policy, as long as we signed an affidavit saying the certificate was lost. The receipt says $82,000. They'll insure it for that amount. And if something were to happen to the ring, they would pay out the full amount. No questions asked." I let the words hang in the air. I was planting the idea of insurance fraud in his head, framing it as a solution to his lost certificate problem. In reality, I was luring him into a federal crime. His eyes, which had been dull with panic, slowly lit up with understanding. A slow, greedy smile spread across his face. He saw an opportunity not just to solve his immediate problem, but to double his winnings. He thought he could get his hands on my $90,000 savings and an $80,000 insurance payout. "Chloe," he said, his voice a low, admiring whisper, "you are brilliant, absolutely brilliant." He thought it was his idea, that he was corrupting me, the fool, He had no idea he was just a puppet, and I was holding all the strings. The next phase required precision. I used a portion of my savings to pay Frank for some extracurricular activities. He procured a perfect, high-quality forgery of the original graph purchase receipt and the GIA certificate Julian claimed to have lost. Frank had a guy for everything. I presented the forged documents to a private insurance broker, another of Frank's contacts, a retired insurance adjuster who was enjoying his role in our little play. We took out a policy on the $82,000 ring. Julian was with me every step of the way, practically vibrating with greed. He was now officially complicit. With the policy active, it was time for the final act. I chose a Thursday night. Julian was out at a client dinner, which Frank had confirmed was actually a date with another woman he was trying to scam. Perfect. I went through the apartment with the methodical precision of a crime scene cleaner. I took everything of real value, my laptop, my grandmother's jewelry, my passport, and most importantly, my patisserie business plan, and stashed it in a locker I'd rented. Then I trashed the place, not violently, but selectively. I tipped over a bookshelf, smashed a cheap lamp, and emptied my jewelry box on the floor, making sure to leave behind a few pieces of costume jewelry to make it look authentic. The final touch was the window. I opened the latch on the living room window that led to the fire escape and used a crowbar to lightly jimmy the frame, creating the appearance of forced entry. It looked like a classic smash and grab. Then I went out. I went to a movie in a crowded theater, paying with a credit card to establish a clear timeline. I left my phone at home. When I returned just after 11, I opened my front door and let out a scream that would have made Jamie Lee Curtis proud. I called 911, my voice a hysterical, sobbing mess. I was a phenomenal actress. When the Chicago police officers arrived, I was the perfect victim, trembling, tearful, violated. I walked them through the ransacked apartment, my voice catching as I pointed to the open jewelry box. "My God," I whispered, clutching an officer's arm. "My engagement ring. It's gone." Julian came rushing home, full of feigned shock and outrage. He played the part of the protective, furious fiancé beautifully, demanding the police do everything in their power to catch the scum who did this. He held me as I gave my statement, whispering comforting words in my ear. Under his breath, so only I could hear, he murmured, "You were amazing, baby, truly amazing." He thought we were partners in crime. He had no idea he was the sole cast member in a tragedy of his own making. The police report was filed. The insurance claim was submitted. Julian was eager to get his hands on the payout. "As soon as that money comes in," he said, his eyes gleaming, "we'll put it all, plus your savings, into the tech fund. We'll be millionaires by summer, Chloe." I just smiled and told him I couldn't wait. I had to endure another week of his presence, of his touch, of his lies. It was like living with a snake, and I could feel its venom seeping into my soul. But I held on, focusing on the endgame. My hatred for him was a cold, pure flame, and I tended to it like a sacred fire. Finally, the call came. The insurance claim had been approved. A check for $82,000 was being overnighted. The moment the money cleared my account, I executed the final phase of my plan. I transferred the insurance payout, along with every penny of my own savings, into a new business account under a newly created LLC, the Gilded Stone Patisserie. The account was ironclad, registered solely in my name. Julian had no access, no claim, no knowledge of its existence. I packed a single bag, walked out of the Gold Coast apartment, and never looked back. My final message to him was a simple text. "Meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m., 1840 N Clark Street. Time to make our investment." He replied almost instantly, "Can't wait, beautiful. Our new life starts tomorrow." Oh, it did, just not his. The address I gave him wasn't a bank or an investment firm. It was an empty storefront in the heart of Lincoln Park, right across from the park itself. It was a beautiful space, with high ceilings and a huge picture window that bathed the dusty floor in morning light. It was the space I had been dreaming of for years, the future home of my patisserie. I had signed the lease that morning, using the insurance money as my down payment. Julian arrived at exactly 10 a.m. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive suit, his smile wide and triumphant. He strode into the empty space, looking around with a puzzled expression. An interesting place for a wire transfer, Chloe. A little rustic? It's not rustic, Julian. It's a blank canvas, Earl, I said. I was standing in the center of the room. My voice didn't shake. My hands were steady. The fear and heartbreak were gone, replaced by a serenity so complete it felt like enlightenment. This is my new business? His smile faltered. Your business? What are you talking about? What about our investment? The tech fund? There is no tech fund, is there, Julian? I said calmly. Just like there was no $80,000 diamond, just a series of lies designed to get you my savings. The color drained from his face as he finally understood he'd walked into a trap. He started to bluster, to deny, but I cut him off. Don't, I said, my voice sharp as shattering glass. Don't you dare lie to me again. The performance is over. I tossed a thick manila envelope onto the floor between us. It landed with a heavy thud. That is your life, Julian, or rather the series of lives you've destroyed. It's all in there. The pawn ticket for the diamond you sold, the names and numbers of the 3 other women you've defrauded in the last 2 years, the proof of your unlicensed brokerage activities, a complete breakdown of your staggering debt. It was compiled by a very thorough private investigator. He stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. His confident facade was cracking, revealing the pathetic, terrified little man underneath. You're crazy, he stammered. No, I'm just a baker, and bakers are meticulous. We follow recipes, and the recipe for your destruction was surprisingly simple. I walked over to a small box I'd placed in the corner and opened it. I took out the cubic zirconia ring. You left this behind, I said, holding it up. It sparkled under the light, a monument to his greed. And you also left behind a very interesting voicemail on my phone 2 nights ago when you thought I was asleep. The one where you celebrated our successful insurance fraud and detailed exactly how you planned to take my savings and disappear. I held up my phone, the recording queued up and ready to play. Wire fraud, mail fraud, insurance fraud. That's a federal case, Julian. We're talking 10, maybe 20 years in prison. He was hyperventilating now, his face pale and slick with sweat. What do you want? He whispered, his voice hoarse. I want you to disappear, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, but each word was laced with venom. You are going to walk out of this door, and you are going to vanish from my life and from this city. You will not contact me. You will not contact any of the other women in that file. If I ever see your face again, if I ever hear your name whispered on the wind, I will personally walk this envelope, along with this recording, into the FBI field office on South Roosevelt Road. Am I clear? He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The charming, powerful man was gone. All that was left was a hollow shell, a common thief brought to his knees. He gave a jerky, pathetic nod. Good, I said. I tossed the fake ring into the box. It landed with a faint, unsatisfying clink. Now get out of my bakery. He practically scrambled out of the door, a broken, defeated man disappearing into the bustling Chicago morning. I stood there in the empty, sunlit space for a long time, the silence broken only by the sound of my own steady breathing. I had won. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a cleansing, a controlled burn that had cleared away all the dead wood to make way for new growth. 6 months later, the Gilded Stone patisserie had its grand opening. The space was transformed. It was filled with the scent of butter and caramelized sugar, the warm glow of custom lighting, and the happy chatter of a crowd spilling out onto the sidewalk. The display cases were filled with my creations. croissants with 1,000 flaky layers, macarons in a rainbow of delicate colors, elaborate cakes that were miniature works of art. My dream, paid for by a lie. A local food critic was there, raving about my salted caramel eclairs. Old friends, the ones Julian had tried to isolate me from, were there, raising champagne flutes in my honor. I had never felt so tired and so completely, utterly alive. Standing behind the counter, watching the city embrace the dream he had tried to steal, I felt a strange sense of peace. He thought the ring was a symbol of his power over me. Now, its legacy is built into the walls of this place, a beautiful lie that bought me my beautiful truth. The end.